This is Dog Days by Graham Masterton. Okay, Jack was much better looking than me. I was funnier than he was, and women love to laugh. That was how I picked up a girl as stunning as Kylie when Jack was still dating Melanie Walpert. Melanie Walpert might have been a judge's daughter, and she might have screamed like Maria Callas whenever she and Jack did the wild thing together. She had masses of wiry black curls, millions of moles, and she thought that The Matrix was an art movie. Apart from that, she was a Scientologist, and she smelled of vanilla pods. I met Kylie in the commissary at Cedars-Sinai. We were standing in line with our trays. Both of us reached for the last Cobb salad at the same time. "Go ahead," I said. "You have it. Please." I shouldn't eat Cobbs anyhow. I'm allergic. She peered into the salad bowl. "I don't even know what a Cobb is." "You're having a Cobb salad for lunch. Don't even know what a Cobb is." She shook her head. "I'm not from around here. I've only been here for 2 weeks." Yowza, 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 she was amazing. She was tall, nearly as tall as me, with very short blonde hair, sun-bleached and feathery. She had strong cheekbones and a strong jaw, wide brown eyes the color of Hershey chocolate. Her lips were full and cushiony. When she smiled, her teeth were dazzling, so you wanted to lick them with the tip of your tongue just to feel how clean they were. She had an amazing figure, too. Beach ball breasted, with wide surfer shoulders, long legs, and those wedge-heeled Greek sandals that tie up with all those complicated strings. I realized almost instantaneously I was in love. "Don't worry," I told her. "I'll have the 5-bean surprise." "Okay," she said. "What's the surprise?" "Well, it's not really a surprise, if you eat that many beans." We sat down together in the far corner of the commissary. I pointed out John D. Dybris, M.D., the proctologist, Randolph Feinstein, M.D., who specialized in aggressive kidney tumors, and Jacob Halpern, M.D., who could take out your prostate gland while he was playing Nobody Loves You When You're Down and Out on the harmonica. "I'm a physiotherapist myself," said Kylie. "Children mostly, with muscular disorders." "Kylie. It's an interesting name." "Yes, well, it means boomerang." "You know something," I told her. "I don't believe in boomerangs. All that ever happens is one aborigine throws a stick, hits this other aborigine right on the bean, so this other aborigine gets really pissed and throws it back. So the first aborigine thinks, 'That's amazing.' I throw this stick, and 5 minutes later it comes flying back." Kylie laughed. "You're crazy, you know that?" And that was how we started going out together. I took her to the Sidewalk Cafe at Venice Beach, bought her a Georgia O'Keeffe omelet, avocado, bacon, mushrooms, and cheese. I took her to Disneyland, and she adored it. She met Minnie, for Christ's sake. I still have the picture, though it's wrinkled with tears. I took her hopping into the Vanguard. We drove up to see my cousin Sybil in my '75 Toronado, with a warm wind fluffing our hair, and Sybil served us char-grilled tuna, showed Kylie how to throw a terracotta pot. Idyllic days, especially when we went back to my apartment on Franklin Avenue, cramped and messy as it was, fell into my bed together, slow motion, with the full moon shining through the open window, and Beethoven's Fifth Piano Concerto tinkling in the background, and Juanita next door cluttering saucepans in the sink like a Tijuana percussion band. For a beautiful girl, Kylie was a strangely clumsy and inexperienced lover. What she lacked in experience, she made up for in strength and energy and appetite. I'll tell you the truth. There were some nights when I almost wished that she'd leave me alone, give me a couple of hours to get some sleep. Just as my eyelids were dropping, her hand would come crawling across my thigh, start tugging at me, like I was some kind of bell rope. Much as I liked it, I used to wake up in the morning feeling as if I'd been expertly beaten up. I should have counted my blessings. We'd been together only 8.5 weeks. When the inevitable happened, we ran into Jack. We were strolling along the beach eating ice cream cones when I saw him in the near distance coming toward us, with that monstrous mutt of his bounding all around him. Even if you hated his guts, which I didn't, you had to admit that he was a great-looking guy. Tall, with dark, brushed-back hair, straight Elvis Presley nose, and intensely blue eyes. He was wearing a black linen shirt, unbuttoned to reveal his gym-toned torso, and knee-length khaki pants. While I was still out of earshot, I turned to Kylie and said, "Why don't we go for a latte? There's a great little coffee house right on the boardwalk here." "Oh, do we have to?" she pleaded. "I just love the ocean so much." "I know. The ocean's great, isn't it? So big, so wet. I'm really jonesing for a latte, and the ocean will still be here when we get back. How can you feel like a coffee when you're eating an ice cream cone? It's a contrast. Cold, hot, hot, cold. I like to surprise my mouth, that's all. I believe in surprising at least one of my organs every single day. Yesterday I surprised my nose. How did you do that? I tried to walk through the balcony door without opening it, but come on, how about that latte? I glanced quickly toward Jack, trying not to make it obvious that I was looking in his direction. I was growing a little panicky now. Apart from Brad Pitt, Jack was the only person in the world I didn't want Kylie to meet. Well, she said, if you're really dying for one. But then Jack's dog ran into the surf, barking at a trio of seagulls, and Kylie turned and saw it and said, Look at that gorgeous Great Dane. My parents used to have one just like that. Oh, it's so cute, don't you think? The dog is bigger than I am. How can you call it cute? Oh, it just is. Great Danes are so lovable. They're intelligent, they're obedient, and they're so noble. I adore them. Listen, I said, I could really use that latte. I don't think that Kylie was even listening to me. She clapped her hands and called out, Here, girl! Here, girl! And the stupid Great Dane came galloping across the beach toward her, wagging its stupid tail. And of course Jack recognized me and shouted out, Bob! And the game was up. Bob, how's it going? You two know each other? Asked Kylie, kneeling down at the sand and tugging at the Great Dane's ears with as much enthusiasm as she tugged at my bell rope. Oh, you're a beautiful, beautiful girl, aren't you? Yes, you are. Oh, yes, you are. God, it was enough to make me bring up my cap and crunch. Sure, we know each other, said Jack, hunkering down beside Kylie and patting the Great Dane's flanks. His grin was ridiculously dazzling. His knees were mahogany brown, he even had perfect toenails. Jack and I were at med school together, I explained. We were the two musketeers, said Jack. I was beginning to wish he would stop grinning like that. Both for one and one for both, that's what Bob always used to say. But we went our separate ways, I told her. I chose oncology because I wanted to alleviate human suffering. Jack chose cosmetic surgery because he wanted to elevate women's breasts. You're a cosmetic surgeon? Kylie asked him. I could tell by the way she tilted her head on one side. Jack had half won her over already. A dishy cosmetic surgeon with a beautiful dog and mahogany knees. What did it matter if he didn't know any one-liners? How's Melanie? I asked him, still as voluptuous as ever. I gave him a sassy wiggle and winked. Come on. I was fighting for my very existence here. Oh, Melanie and I broke up months ago. She met a divorce lawyer. A very rich divorce lawyer. Sorry to hear it. Jesus. Kylie was even kissing that goddamn dog. Who are you dating now? Nobody right now. Just me and Sheba, all on our own-some. Kylie stood up. Listen, she said, Bob and I were just going for a latte. Why don't you and Sheba join us? I thought you didn't want to go for a latte, I told her. I thought you wanted to stay on the beach. Kylie didn't take her eyes off Jack. No, I think I could fancy a latte. Maybe one of those cinnamon donuts. The three of them walked up the beach ahead of me, Jack, Kylie, and Sheba. All I could do was trail along behind them, feeling pale and badly dressed and excluded. Thank you, God, I said, looking up at the sky. He who giveth with one hand and snatcheth away with the other. Kylie turned around and smiled at me. Just as she did so, a seagull pooped on my shoulder. The cafe was called Better Latte Than Never, which I thought was bitterly appropriate. I sat at the table with Jack and Kylie, trying to be witty, but I knew that it was no use. They couldn't take their eyes off each other. When I came out of the bathroom after rinsing the seagull splatter from my shirt, I saw that Jack's hand was resting on top of hers, as naturally as if they'd been friends all their lives. What a great guy, said Kylie as we drove back along Sunset. He's so interesting. You know, not like most of the men you meet. He's multifaceted, I'll give you that. Did he tell you that he knits? No, he didn't. Maybe he could knit me a sweater. I don't think so. He only knits blanket squares. They're not very square, either. They get some perceptual weakness he inherited from his mother. Did he tell you that his mother played the glockenspiel? She only knew one tune, but it could reduce strong men to tears. You're jealous, said Kylie. Her eyes were hidden behind large Chanel sunglasses, same large Chanel sunglasses that I had bought for her on Rodeo Drive. Jealous? What are you talking about? I can tell when you're jealous because you belittle people. Always make it sound like a joke, but it's not. Hey, Jack and I go way back. And you're jealous of him, aren't you? I bet you always have been. Me? I'm an oncologist. You think I'm jealous of some tit doctor? Besides, his breath smells of cheese. There's one thing I always noticed about him. I never liked to tell him. His girlfriends always used to call him Monterey Jack, but he never figured out why. You're jealous. I looked at her acutely, but all I could see was two of my own reflection in her sunglasses. My crumpled lime green t-shirt was the damp patch on the shoulders. Do I have anything to be jealous of, do you think? I asked her. At that moment, I almost rear-ended a dry-cleaning van, and her answer was blotted out by the screaming of tires, so I never heard it. Of course, I knew what it was. I took her out to 25 degrees on Thursday evening for hamburgers. We sat in one of the black leather-upholstered booths, which I thought would be romantic. It's incredible what a reasonably supple person can get up to in a black leather-upholstered booth. But she was unusually preoccupied. She kept fiddling with her fork, around and around. When our orders eventually arrived, she said, I've been thinking, Bob. You've been thinking that you should have ordered the 3-cheese sandwich instead of the turkey burger? No, not that. Let me see. You've been thinking that you hate this loose weave sport coat I'm wearing. No? I don't believe that's it. Aha! I know what it is. You've been thinking that you and I should stop seeing each other because Jack has called you and asked you out on a date, a threesome. Him and you and the houndless from hell. She looked at me sideways, and there was genuine remorse in her eyes. I'm sorry. You're sorry because Jack has called you and asked you out on a date? Or you're sorry you waited until our food arrived before you told me about it? Because I can't possibly eat a 12-ounce cheeseburger while my throat is all choked up. I'm just sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. Nobody ever does, Kylie. Nobody ever does. I shall have my revenge. Jack may be good-looking, may be able to charm the turkey buzzards out of the trees. You will very soon discover that Jack suffers from premature ejaculation, and because of that, your love-making will last for no more than nanoseconds. Don't even sneeze when Jack's making love to you, because you might miss it. Kylie looked away. As a matter of fact, Bob, he's very good. He's tender. He's creative. He can keep it up for hours. I sat up very straight with my chin tilted upward. I didn't know what to say. Eventually, I shuffled my butt sideways out of the booth and stood up. The waiter came up to me and said, Something wrong, sir? Yes. This isn't what I wanted. None of it. He frowned and flipped back his notepad. I think you will find you have everything you asked for, sir. I shook my head. It isn't easy to argue when you're trying to stop yourself crying. You're going, sir? Who's going to pay? The lady will pay, I told him. Bob, said Kylie, don't let's end it like this, please. How else do you want to end it? You want violins? Let me take you out for hamburgers and you've already gone to bed with him? She shook her head. Good, I told her. Have a nice life. Jack and you and that bitch of his. Hope you can tell the difference between you. I shouldn't have said that. I'd fallen for Kylie in a way I'd never fallen for any girl before. It wasn't only her fabulous looks, the way that other men swiveled around and stared at her whenever we walked past together, although of course that was part of it. It was her utter simplicity, the way she trusted the world to take care of her, her genuine surprise when it didn't. It was the way she propped herself up on one elbow when we were lying in bed, stroked my hair as if she couldn't believe I was real. She was magical, in every sense of the word. And that evening, after she had told me that she and I were through, all I could do was creep back in my apartment like a wounded animal, lie with my face buried in her pillow, smelling her perfume. The phone rang. After a long while, I heaved myself off the bed and answered it. Bob, it's Jack. Jack. Not my best friend, Jack. Not my old med school buddy. Both for one and one for both. Bob, I don't know what to say to you. I have a good idea. You could say, Bob, I'm going to go to the top story of Century Park East and I'm going to jump off. Please, Bob, don't joke. Who the fuck is joking? You think I'm joking? I put a curse on you, Jack. I swear to God, You and your fucking Great Dane. I curse you. There was a lengthy pause. Eventually Jack said, Can't say I blame you, buddy. Stay well. Don't be a stranger forever. I hung up. So much I could have said. Most of it would have been obscene. What was the point? 6 weeks and 3 days later, my curse worked. It was a Saturday morning and I was driving east on Olympic on my way to see my friend Dick Palzer for a game of squash. I pulled up at the intersection of Western Avenue. Who should be waiting at the traffic signal right ahead of me but Jack, his fancy schmancy Porsche Cayenne SUV. Sitting much too close to him, with her fingers buried in his hair, was Kylie, the pink baseball cap. Hunched up in the back seat like somebody's Hungarian grandma was Sheba. My Jeep was burgling away like it always did, on account of a sizable hole in the muffler. It wasn't long before Jack checked his rearview mirror and saw that it was me. He said something to Kylie. Kylie turned around and gave me a smile and a finger wave. I ignored her. Then she took off her baseball cap, waved it wildly from side to side. I could see she was laughing. I could go to confession 3 times a day for the rest of my life and still not be forgiven for what I did next. I saw scarlet. All the hurt and all the rejection and all the anger, it all boiled up inside of me and I went temporarily mad. That was supposed to have been my life, sitting that SUV in front of me. That was supposed to have been my happiness. Instead of that, I was sitting alone in the vehicle behind, being laughed at by the girl of my dreams. I pressed my foot down on the gas and rear-ended the Cayenne with a satisfying bosh. I could see that Jack and Kylie were both jolted, and Sheba was knocked right off her seat and onto the floor. Jack and Kylie turned around and shouted at me, though I couldn't hear what they were saying. I shrugged, if I didn't understand what they were shouting for, and then I pressed my foot down on the gas again. There was another bosh, and the Cayenne was shoved forward 3 or 4 feet. Now Jack was really mad. He climbed out of the driver's seat, came storming toward me, swinging Sheba's metal-studded leash. Just to annoy him one more time, I slammed my foot down and rear-ended the Cayenne again. This time, though, there was no loud impact. Jack's foot was no longer on the brake pedal. He must have left the Cayenne in neutral. My Jeep barely nudged its rear fender, rolled forward another 10 or 12 feet, well past the traffic signal. Without any warning, a huge red Peterbilt semi came bellowing across the intersection and struck the passenger side of the Cayenne. The collision was so devastating that the SUV was pushed all the way across Olympic onto the sidewalk on the opposite side of the street, demolishing a mailbox. Even today, I can't recall the noise of that crash. It must have been deafening. The way I remember it, there was no noise at all, only the silent crumpling of metal, the glittering explosion of glass. When my hearing suddenly returned, however, I heard the screaming of 22 tires on the blacktop, and Jack screaming too, as if he were trying to drown them out. I jumped down from my Jeep and ran across the road, dodging around the traffic. The truck driver was climbing down from his cab too. Heavily built Mexican in a red t-shirt and baggy green shorts, a Dodger's cap screwed on sideways. He stared at me with bulging brown eyes and said, "There wasn't a damn thing I could do, man. I stood on everything. There wasn't a damn thing I could do." The passenger door of Jack's Cayenne had been crushed in so far that it had bent the steering wheel. The tangle of metal and plastic was almost incomprehensible. I could see blonde hair and blood, one of Kylie's hands reaching out from a gap in between the door and the front wheel arch, unmarked, perfect, with silver rings on every finger, as if she were reaching out for help. "Kylie!" Jack was begging her. "Kylie, tell me you're okay. Kylie!" He climbed up on the side of the SUV and tried to wrench open the passenger door with his bare hands, but it was wedged in far too tight. "Somebody call an ambulance!" he screamed. "For Christ's sake, somebody call an ambulance!" Of course, somebody already had, and it was only a few minutes before we heard the whooping and scribbling of a distant siren. Jack stayed where he was, leaning against the smashed-in door, pleading with Kylie to still be alive. "I stood on everything," the truck driver repeated. "There wasn't a damn thing I could do." "I know," I said, gave him a reassuring pat on his big sweat-soaked shoulder. 2 squad cars arrived, then an ambulance, and then a fire truck. The police made all of us spectators shuffle across to the other side of the street. The fire crew started working with cutters and hydraulic spreaders, trying to extricate Kylie from the wreckage. I could see sparks flying, and the arthritic groaning of metal being bent. Jack was sitting on the back step of the ambulance, with a shiny metal blanket around him. A paramedic was standing beside him with one hand raised, as if he were giving him a benediction. "I can't afford to lose my license, man," said the truck driver. "I got on new carpets to pay for." I wasn't listening. Instead, I was frowning off to my left, further along Olympic. About 50 yards away, I could see Sheba, Jack's Great Dane. She was standing by the side of the road, quite still, more like a statue of a dog than a real dog. Looking back at the smashed-up Cayenne, I could see then the rear offside door had burst open in the collision, and Sheba must have either been thrown out or jumped out. I was just about to tell one of the police officers that she was loose when Jack turned around and saw her too, sent the paramedics off to bring her back. 2 police officers came over to us. One of them shouted out, "Anybody here witness this accident? If you did, I want to hear from you." I was interviewed twice by 2 highly disinterested detectives from the Highway Patrol, one of whom should have had a master's degree in nose-picking. After the second visit, I received a phone call from my attorney telling me there was insufficient evidence for prosecution. Nobody had clearly witnessed what had happened, not even Jack. The truck driver had been estimated to have been traveling at nearly 40 miles an hour in his attempt to beat the traffic signals. I wrote Jack a letter of condolence. I think I did it more for my benefit than for his. I never sent it. Kylie's casket was flown back home to be interred at the church in Upper Kedron near Brisbane, where she'd been confirmed at the age of 13. Occasionally, friends of mine would tell me they had run across Jack at medical conventions or in bars. They all seemed to give me a similar story. He was more distant than he used to be, quieter, like he has his mind on something. He was pretty much okay. Then, in the first week of October, I saw Jack for myself. I was driving home late in the evening down Coldwater Canyon Drive after attending a bar mitzvah at my friend Jacob Perlman's house in Sherman Oaks. As I came around that wide right-hand bend just before Hidden Valley Road, I saw a jogger running along the road in front of me. My headlights caught the reflectors on his shoes. First of all, it was just as well that he was wearing them because his tracksuit was totally black. I gave him a double bip on my horn to warn him that I was behind him. I gave him a very wide berth as I drove around him. I wasn't drunk. I was drunk-ish. Didn't want to end up with a jogger as a hood ornament. As I passed him, however, I saw that he wasn't running alone. 6 or 7 yards ahead of him was a Great Dane, loping at an easy, relaxed pace. I suddenly realized that the Great Dane had to be Sheba. The jogger had to be Jack. He lived only about a half-mile away, after all, on Gloaming Drive. I pulled into the side of the road and slid to a stop. Maybe I would have kept on going if I had been sober. But Jack and I had been the 2 musketeers once upon a time, both for one and one for both. And don't think I hadn't been eaten up by guilt for what I had done to Kylie. I climbed down from the Jeep and lifted both arms in the air. "Jack!" I shouted. "Is that you, Jack? It's me, Bob!" The jogger immediately ran forward a little way and seized the Great Dane's collar. I still wasn't entirely sure it was Jack, because he and the dog were illuminated only by my near-side tail light, offset tail light having been busted earlier that evening by some over-enthusiastic backing-up maneuvers. "Jack, all I want to do is talk to you, man. I need to tell you how sorry I am. Jack!" But Jack, if it was Jack, didn't say a word. Instead, he scrambled down the side of the road, his shoes sliding in the dust. The Great Dane scrambled after him. They pushed their way through some bushes, then they were gone. I could hear them crashing through the undergrowth for a while, but then there was nothing but me and the soft evening wind fluffing in my ears. That had to be Jack, I told myself as I walked back to my Jeep. It had to be Jack. I have to make amends. I didn't really care about making amends, to tell you the truth. I did care about absolution. Like Oscar Wilde said, each man kills the things he loves. I may not have done it with a bitter look, or a kiss, or a flattering word. I'd done it out of jealousy. Maybe that was worse. I needed somebody to forgive me. I needed Jack to forgive me. Most of all, I needed me to forgive me. I took the next left into Gloaming Drive and drove slowly down it until I came to Jack's house. It was a single-story building. It was built on several different levels, with glass walls and a wide veranda at the back with a view over the city. At the front, it was partially shielded from the road by a large yew hedge. I parked on the opposite side of the street at such an angle that, when he returned from his jog, Jack wouldn't easily be able to see me. I waited over 20 minutes. 2 or 3 times I nearly dozed off. I was beginning to sober up, and I think that this was a very bad idea when Jack suddenly appeared in his black tracksuit, jogging down the road toward me. Sheba was close behind him, running very close to heel. Jack ran up the front steps of his house and, still jogging on the spot, took out his keys and opened the front door. He and Sheba disappeared inside. There was a short pause, and the lights went on. Okay, I thought, what do I do now? Ring the doorbell and say I want to apologize for killing Kylie? Ring the doorbell and say, here I am. You know you want to hit me, so hit me. Ring the doorbell and burst into tears. I thought the best thing to do would be to let Jack wind down from his run, give him time to take a shower and pour himself a drink. Maybe he'd be more receptive when he was relaxed. So I waited another 15 minutes, even though my muscles were beginning to creak. Eventually, I eased myself out of the Jeep and closed the door as quietly as I could. I crossed the street until I reached the yew hedge. Looking through the branches, I could see Jack standing in his living room, wearing a tobacco-brown bathrobe with a cream towel wound around his neck. He was holding what looked like a tumbler of whiskey. He was talking to somebody. No, this wasn't the right time to ask him for forgiveness, not if he had company. I waited for a while longer, and then I skirted my way around to the other side of the yew hedge to see if I could make out who he was talking to, but I couldn't. I looked around, make sure that no nosy neighbors were watching me, and I quickly crossed the lawn in front of the house, went down the side passage where the trash bins were stored. It was completely dark there. I was able to climb up on top of one of the bins, heave myself over the wooden fence into the backyard. There were cedarwood steps leading down from the veranda into the yard. I mounted them cautiously, keeping my head low, till I could peer over the decking into the softly lit living room. Jack was pacing up and down in front of a large brown leather couch. A woman was sitting on the couch, a blonde, though I couldn't see her face. Her hair was feathery, rather like Kylie's. It was longer than Kylie's used to be. The sliding door to the veranda was a few inches ajar. I couldn't distinctly hear what Jack and the blonde were saying to each other, but I stayed on those steps for almost 20 minutes, watching Jack talking and drinking and stalking up and down. He appeared to be angry about something, and frustrated. Maybe he was angry because he had seen me, frustrated that the law had never punished me for causing Kylie's death. One point, however, the blonde woman said something to him, and he stopped, lowered his head, and nodded as if he accepted that she was right. He approached the couch and kissed her, tenderly stroked her hair with the back of his knuckles. If the look in his eyes wasn't the look of love, it was certainly the look of like you very much. He was halfway through pouring himself a second whiskey when his phone warbled. He picked it up and paced out of sight. When he came back, he said something to the blonde woman, screwed the top back on the whiskey bottle. Then he disappeared. I waited and waited. After about 10 minutes, Jack reappeared. Now he was dressed in a pale blue shirt and black chinos. He gave the blonde woman another kiss, and he walked out again. I heard an SUV start up around the front of the house, back out of the driveway, and turn northward up Gloaming Drive. I didn't really know what to do next. The only sensible alternative was to go back home, try to talk to Jack some other time, though I seriously doubted that he would agree to it. I crept crabwise back down the steps, groped my way back along the side of the house in the shadows. Then I thought, what I need here is an intermediary, a go-between, someone who could speak to Jack on my behalf and explain how remorseful I feel. And who better to do that than somebody who's obviously very fond of? Who better, in fact, than the blonde woman on the couch? Women understand about guilt, I reasoned. Women understand about remorse. If I could convince the woman that I was genuinely sorry for what I had done to Kylie, maybe she could persuade Jack to forgive me. I climbed quietly back up the steps again. Didn't want to startle her, especially since she might well have a gun. I was technically trespassing. Didn't know how fierce Sheba could be either. If she thought I was an unwelcome intruder, which to be honest I was. The living room was already in darkness, although the hallway and several other rooms were still lit. I could hear samba music and water running. I crossed the veranda and went up the sliding door. I hesitated, and I called out, "Excuse me, is anybody home?" This is crazy, I thought. I know there's somebody home. "Excuse me," I called out, much louder this time. "This is Bob. I'm an old friend of Jack's." Still no answer. I waited and waited. Below me, the lights of Los Angeles sparkled and shimmered like the campfires of a vast barbarian army. I should have gone back down those steps and gone home and forgotten that I'd ever seen Jack again. Sometimes we do things for which there's no possible forgiveness. All we can do is go on living the best way we can. But I slid the veranda door a little wider. stepped inside the living room. It was chilly in there, severely air-conditioned, smelled of dried spices, cinnamon and cloves. I crossed to the center of the room. On the wall there was a strange painting of a pale blue lake with ritual figures all around it. Heard the woman singing in one of the bedrooms. She walks with a sway when she walks. She talks like a witch lady talks. She sounded throaty, to say the least. "Hello?" I called, though I was aware that my voice was still too weak for her to hear me. "This is Bob. I'm a friend of Jack's." I heard the clickety-clacking of Sheba's claws on the hardwood floor. I prayed that the next thing I heard wouldn't be kill. I glanced down at the brown leather couch where the blonde woman had been sitting. 6 or 7 scatter cushions were strewn across it, with bright red and yellow covers and fringes. On one of the cushions was a ski mask, a brindling mixture of black and brown wool. I picked it up and stared into its empty eye sockets. There was something about it which really gave me the willies, as if it was a voodoo mask. "Put it down," said a harsh woman's voice. "Hey, I'm sorry," I said, lowering the ski mask and turning toward the hallway. "I was just—" It was then that I literally sank to my knees in shock. It was Sheba, the Great Dane. But Sheba didn't have Sheba's head anymore. Sheba had Kylie's head. She walked toward me and stood in front of me. There was no question about it. It was Kylie. Her face was haggard, with puffed-up lips. Her jaw looked lumpy, as if it had been smashed and rebuilt. Her Hershey brown eyes were still the same. "Jesus," I said. "Jesus, I'm having a nightmare." "You think you're having a nightmare," she croaked. I struggled to my feet and sat on the couch. Kylie, Sheba, stayed where she was, staring at me. "Christ, Kylie, this is unreal." "I wish it was, Bob, but it isn't." "How did you get in here?" I just climbed over the fence." "What happened to you, for Christ's sake?" "I died, Bob. I was brought back to life." "Like this? This is insane. Was it Jack? Did Jack do this to you?" Kylie closed her eyes to indicate yes. "But how could he do it? I mean, why?" Her voice was very strange. "Jack said he was so much in love with me he couldn't bear to lose me. That crash, my entire body was crushed. Legs, pelvis, rib cage, spine. I wouldn't have survived for more than 2 or 3 days. So that was when Jack decided to sacrifice Sheba in order to save me. But how did he get away with it? Doing an operation like that must be totally illegal." "Jack has his own clinic, remember? 3 highly qualified surgeons. He persuaded them that they would be making medical history. He paid them all a great deal of money." "But how about you? Didn't you have any say?" "I was unconscious, Bob. I didn't know anything about it until I woke up." "I've never fainted, ever. Not even when my cousin Freddie ripped off 3 of his fingers with a circular saw. Right then, I could feel the blood emptying out of my brain. I was pretty darn close to it. The whole world turned black and white, like a photographic negative. Felt like I was perspiring ice water." "What do you feel about it now?" I asked her. "How can you manage to live like this?" She gave me a sad, bruised smile. "I try to treat myself with respect. I try to treat Sheba with respect. That's why I go out running, to give her body the exercise she needs. We always go out at night. I always wear that ski mask so that nobody can see my face and my hair." "But you can talk. Dogs can't talk." "Jack transplanted my vocal cords. I still get breathless, but I don't find talking too difficult." She came up closer. Didn't know if I could touch her or not. If I did, what was I supposed to do? Kiss her? Put my arms around her? Stroke her? I still couldn't believe that I was looking at a huge brindled dog with a human woman's head. "Most of all," she said, "I try to be Kylie. I try to forget what's happened to me, live the best life I can." I looked her straight in her Hershey brown eyes. "You can't bear it, can you?" "Bob, I have to bear it. What else can I do? How does a dog commit suicide? I can't shoot myself. I can't hang myself. I can't open bottles of pills. I can't even get out of the house and run out on the freeway. I can't turn the door handle and I can't jump over the fences at the sides. But how can Jack say that he loves you when you're suffering like this? He's in total denial. He says he loves me, but he's obsessed. He's always bringing me flowers and perfume. Bought me that painting by Sidney Nolan. Must have cost nearly $250,000. I sat on the couch staring at her. Simply didn't know what to say. The worst thing was that I was just as responsible for that monstrous thing that had happened to her as Jack was. I had killed her. Jack had given her life. But what a life! It made me question everything I'd ever felt about the chronically sick and the paraplegic and the catastrophically injured. What point is a life not worth living anymore? Who's to say that it isn't? The first time ever, I couldn't think of any wisecracks. I could only think that tears were sliding down my cheeks, and there was nothing I could do to stop them. Kylie said, "My grandma had a dog she really loved. It was a little fox terrier, and his name was Rip. After my grandpa died, Rip was the only companion she had. She used to talk to him like he was human." She coughed and took a deep breath. "Rip got sick. Cancer, I think. As soon as he was diagnosed, my grandma asked the vet to put him down. She held my hand on the day we buried him. She said that if you truly love someone, whether it's a person or a pet, you never allow them to suffer." "What are you saying to me, Kylie?" She came even closer. I reached out and touched her cheeks. She was very cold. Her skin felt just as soft as it had before when we were lovers. "Help me, Bob. I'm sure that it was fate that brought you here tonight." "Help you?" I knew exactly what she was saying, but I had to hear it from her. "Let me out of here. It's all you have to do. Open the door and let me run away." "Oh, great. So you can throw yourself in front of a truck." "You won't ever have to know. Please, Bob. I can't bear living like this any longer." I stroked her hair. "You're asking me to kill you for a second time. I'm not so sure I can do that." "Please, Bob." I stood up and walked across to that Sidney Nolan painting over the fireplace. "What does this mean?" I asked her. "These figures, they look kind of aboriginal." "They are. The painting's called Ritual Lake. It represents the mystical bond between men and animals." I looked down at her. She looked exhausted. "All right," I said. "I'll help you. I'm damned if I'm going to let you get yourself flattened on the freeway." "I don't care what you do. I just want this to be over." I led her through the hallway to the front door, opened it. Just as I did so, Jack's Audi SUV swerved into the drive, its headlights glaring, and stopped. "Hurry," I said, began to run down the steps with Kylie close behind me. Jack must have seen the front door was open, and he was quicker than both of us. As we reached the bottom step, he opened the door of the SUV and jumped down in front of us. "Bob, Bob, my man, what a surprise!" "Hi, Jack." Kylie and I stopped where we were. Jack came up to me and stood only inches in front of me. His eyes unnaturally widened, like those mad people you see in slasher movies. He was holding Kylie's metal-studded leash in his right hand, slapping it into the palm of his left. "Taking Kylie for a walk, were you, Bob? I'm amazed she trusts you, after what you did to her." "As a matter of fact, Jack, I came round to talk to you." "You came round to talk to me? What could you possibly have to say to me, Bob, that I would ever want to listen to?" "Well, maybe the word remorse means something to you." "Remorse? You're feeling remorse? For what, Bob? For mutilating the woman I loved so severely that this was her only chance of survival? Ruining her life and my life, and ending Sheba's life too?" "Jack," said Kylie in that high, harsh whisper, "nothing can change what's happened. All the rage in the world isn't going to bring me back the way I was. I forgive Bob, and if I can forgive him, can't you? Go back in the house, Kylie." "No, Jack, it's over. I'm going, and I'm not coming back." "Get back in the house, Kylie. Do as you're damn well told." Kylie turned on him. "I'm not a dog, Jack. I'm not your bitch. I'm a woman, and I'll do whatever I want." Jack swung back his arm and lashed her across the face with her leash. She cried out and cowered back, just like a beaten dog. I grabbed hold of the leash and swung Jack around, trying to pull him off balance. He punched me very hard on my cheekbone. I fell backward into the bushes. "Now get inside!" Jack snapped at Kylie and lashed her again. This time, however, Kylie didn't cringe. She leaped up on her hind legs and pushed Jack with her forepaws. Even though she was a female, she must have weighed at least 130 pounds. He collided with the door of his SUV, then dropped under the driveway. "You bitch!" Jack yelled at her, trying to climb to his feet. She pushed him down again, then she ducked her head sideways and bit him. First his nose, and then his cheek. I saw blood flying all across the front of his pale blue shirt. "Get off me!" Jack screamed. "Get off me!" But now Kylie bit into the side of his neck viciously hard. He bellowed and snorted, and the heels of his shiny black shoes kicked against the bricks. She refused to open her jaws. "Kylie," I shouted at her, "for Christ's sakes, let him go." I clambered to my feet and tried to pull her away from him, but Sheba's body was so smooth-haired and muscular I couldn't even get a proper grip. I took a handful of Kylie's blonde hair, pulled that instead, even though I was irrationally worried that I might pull her head off. She kept her teeth buried in Jack's neck until his blood was flooding dark across the driveway, and his shoes gave a last shuddering kick. Eventually, panting, she raised her head. The lower half of her face was smothered in blood. Her eyes looked triumphant. "You've killed him," I said flatly. "Yes," she said. "That was his punishment for keeping me alive." I checked my watch. It was almost 1:15. "We'd better get going," I told her. We drove west on Sunset, not speaking to each other. There was a full moon right above us. The white light turned everything to cardboard, so I felt as if we were driving through a movie set. We looped around the Will Rogers State Park, and we arrived at the seashore. I parked and opened the passenger door so that Kylie could jump out. I walked out onto the sand, dimpled by 1,000,000 feet. Kylie followed me, panting. We reached the shoreline and stood together at the water's edge, where the surf tiredly splashed at our feet. There was a warm breeze blowing from the southwest. I looked down at Kylie and said, "Here we are then, back at the ocean." "Thank you," she said. "Jesus Christ, I don't know what for." "For helping me to end it, that's all." She trotted a little way into the water, and then she turned around. "You're right about boomerangs," she said. "They don't really come back, ever." With that, she began to swim away from the seashore. Looking at her then, you would never have known what had happened to her, because all you could see was a blonde girl's head dipping up and down between the waves. I stood and watched her swimming away until she was out of sight. Then I threw her leash after her, as hard and as far as I could.